This is our 17th Annual Leadership Conference and sponsored by the School of Public Affairs and the Center for the Study of the Individual and Government on the UCCS campus. And we're just grateful to them for putting this on. How many of you were here last year at this conference? Oh, great. I can't use any of the jokes that I used last year. I'll figure something out between sessions. I also want to recognize a couple of people. Dr. Terry Schwartz, who's the Dean of the School of Public Affairs. Dr. Schwartz, over here to my right, your left. Great to have you here. We're honored to have you with us. And then the Executive Director, Jim Null. Jim is right down here in front, and we appreciate all the hard work and the vision that Jim has had. This is a great conference, and I know you're going to learn a lot. You're going to be inspired, and I hope be challenged in your leadership. A couple of things. If you have cell phones, if you would just at least put them on vibrate or silence them, that would be great. If you have to take a call, you could go to the back and step out so that it doesn't disrupt the learning of others. That would be fantastic as well. The restrooms, as you go out, ladies, it's to the right, men, it's to the left. Go through the doors, and then you're on your own. Just kidding. It's too early in the morning, right? We'll have a mid-morning break, and we'll have an afternoon break, and in between we'll have lunch. So that's the best part sometimes of a conference. So now you know you have breaks, mid-morning, afternoon, and we'll have lunch. And lunch will start somewhere around 11:45 or 12 o'clock, or whenever you get rowdy and decide to get up and leave. I think I've got all the things out of the way. By the way, if you're interested in the School of Public Affairs, there is information out at the registration table, and the ladies there will be glad to assist you. So take some time to look over the material. If you want to continue to improve your leadership, I can't think of a better place here in the city. We've come here today to learn. I'm telling you, you got a great roster of speakers. We're going to start out with Retired General Charles Jacoby. We have Chief John Edwards of the Oak Creek, Wisconsin Police Department, Jeannie Smith, former district attorney here in Colorado Springs, and Richard Randall, a talk show host here with KVOR. And each of them will bring, I know, a great deal of experience, inspiration, and leadership. And so we want to get started. Ready to go? Ready to learn? Well, it's my honor, and it's a high honor, to be able to introduce our first speaker, General Charles Jacoby, retired general. He recently retired Commander, North American Aerospace Defense Command and U.S. Northern Command. General Jacoby was raised in Detroit, Michigan. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and they say nothing good comes out of Detroit, Michigan. That is not true. General Jacoby is a sterling example of that. Graduated from the U.S. Military Academy in 1978, was further schooled in infantry basic and advanced courses, the Command and General Staff College, the School of Advanced Military Studies, and the National War College. He holds a master's degree in history from the University of Michigan. General Jacoby is the first Army officer to assume command of the Northern Command, having previously served as a Director for Strategic Plans and Policy on the Joint Staff. He was the Commanding General of the Multinational Corps Iraq and the Deputy Commanding General Combined Joint Task Force 76 and Operation and Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. He is the first non-command pilot to serve as the commander of either NORAD or U.S. NORTHCOM. And I was just told that he has served 41 years in uniform, which is just incredible. Just absolutely. To say that he is the consummate leader of leaders is an understatement. It is a high honor and privilege to welcome our first speaker of the day, Retired General Charles Jacoby.
I've moved 18 times since I've been in the military, lived in a lot of different places, and this is the finest community we ever lived in. We just decided to stay. Kids were happy, wife was happy. I felt like the community, in tough times and in good times, stood behind its military. And, because they're having tough times. You know, when a brigade leaves, a brigade comes back, and you know, all the issues that go with having a giant giant military bases. I used to say it can be a good thing or a bad thing. It's up to the leadership on both sides to make it a good thing. They have a giant military base, sprawled out there, and zillions of 19-year-olds running around. And Colorado Springs makes it a good thing, and the leadership does. And so I just wanted to thank you for that, because I'm looking at a room full of folks that are the roll-up-your-sleeves part of running Colorado Springs. And I usually don't get a chance to thank you for the wonderful place we have to live. And I've been in wonderful places. I served 6 years in Hawaii, and they talked a good fight, but frankly, they wanted us to stay on base, come off occasionally to shop, and then go back. And I've lived other places that felt the same way, and that's not the feeling here. My first, the first soldier that I lost was when I was a lieutenant at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And of course, you'd think they loved their military. But in 1978, I had a soldier downtown misbehaving, probably really misbehaving. But we didn't have a good relationship with the police. That kid was beaten up pretty bad, and eventually we had to move him out of the service, and eventually lost him. And so there are good communities, and there are not so good communities, and there's good bases, and there's not so good bases, and it takes working together, and this is a place where it works. And so, just to give you my perspective over all those years, I just want you to know that. I feel like there is, great trust in this community between the military and the civilian side, to the point where it's almost indistinguishable to me. And all of you play a huge role in that. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about trust, and I'll get to it as we go along. So here's kind of what I'm thinking I'll do. First of all, I should have worn something else. I was worried I was going to, this is the first time I haven't been in my little jungle suit, so I don't have deep pockets to stick my hands. I'm not sure what to do with my hands right now. So, I'll give you the game plan. The game plan is I'm going to go through some of my standard leadership pitch when I would visit units and talk to leaders and talk to soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. And some of it, might not be pertinent to you, but if there's pieces of it that make sense to you, or if there's pieces of it that you'd like to understand, what does that mean to me in a civilian capacity or civilian world, I'd really appreciate it if you'd ask me some questions, because I want to figure out how to transition some of my pitches that I've been given to answer a broader audience than just a bunch of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. So you can help me with that. And I'll tell you a couple stories to illustrate some of the points that I try to make with you. But I really, in the second part, I want to talk about a little bit about my perception of some of the challenges you have. And so, what do I know about it? I don't, I'm just, when I'm not the commander in NORAD, I'm watching TV and standing in line in the DMV like everybody else. And I think, that the public servants are under a little pressure right now. It's a tough environment out there. Budgets are down across all levels of government, except for it seems like some of the states do pretty well. And I guess that's good management and leadership. I think our city is well led, and I know we're going through an election. But I know there are issues out there, especially for on the law enforcement side. I don't want to make it a law enforcement-centric discussion, but I would like to hear your thoughts and get your questions, and then let me put my filter on it and just honestly tell you back what I think. Because I've seen similar kinds of things around the world where frankly, I believe that the places I've been to that have been the biggest mess, and I've been to all the places that are big messes in the world, and so it's usually starts at the local level. Something seriously broken at the local level. I mean, we always worry about the Prime Minister and the Parliament and all that, but there's really some kind of dysfunction that has separated the people, the led from the leaders, and it's either a broken bureaucracy or a broken law enforcement, and it all is summed up in a break in trust between the civilian population that we were dealing with and the leadership that was supposed to be accountable for them. So I'd be, curious to get your questions, hear what your concerns are, and then, one of the things is I don't have to worry about testifying anymore, so I can say whatever I want. Are we taping something? And not be accountable for it. So that came up pretty good. And y'all have a little pamphlet I put on your desk, so I like to give people a takeaway when I go visit. And I once had a boss gave me like a 27-page, paper on his leadership style. I thought, oh my God, I'm just holding it. I know his leadership style is so damn heavy. So he's going to be a micromanager probably. The theme of it is really positive leadership. Now the Army had and still has an ongoing conversation about toxic leadership, and how do you still have toxic leaders in the Army after all these years and all the social change that's taken place, and we do. But the idea of positive leadership has always been central to the U.S. military. I don't know if that comes as a surprise to you. So what does it mean to me to be a positive leader? And I always, try to talk to the leadership team when all of you are leaders in one capacity or another. You're all involved in complex organizations. Doesn't matter how big or small they are. You've got challenging duties. You've got responsibilities that have to get executed. And in the end, if you pull the thread, a lot of people depend on it to get things done. And I like to leave the leadership with some idea of why this positive leadership thing is what fits us, not just because it's politically correct or it's the theme of the day, because we have plenty of those things. The bumper sticker, the leadership bumper sticker of the quarter, we're all going to be positive now. It's really who we are. And for me, my biggest responsibility was, as I got older and I realized this, that every single soldier that was mine had a mom and a dad that was trusting them to me. And so my character and my competence as a leader mattered to not just that formation, but the extended families of those formations, and actually to all of you as citizens who write the checks for that volunteer force. It's your force as a taxpayer. And so I'm accountable, and I always felt that way as a commander, to be accountable to the folks that I was leading and thinking about that they had been entrusted to me. And so then it goes to, then what is, the power of positive leadership there. And I always found, and many times you get proven wrong, but after 41 years, inspiring folks is always better than forcing compliance on folks. I mean, the payoff is enormous. There's immediate payoff and there's downstream payoff. And sometimes the downstream payoff is better than the immediate payoff. And Dave Petraeus, who, depending on which news article has been published, is either a good guy quote or not a good guy quote. But he was my boss a couple times. And he said, are you a leader that fills a room with energy, or do you suck energy out of the room? Now, have you guys experienced that? You know, I have a million times. You know, a leader will whisk his way into your office, into the cubicle, into the tent, into the circle that's talking, and they can, you know, rip into you and criticize and you know, want to get right to fixing things and want you to fix it and change all the rules and institute new policies and just really get to work. And when that leader leaves, what's your reaction? And usually, if they're an energy sucker, your reaction is, ugh, God, I'm so glad he's gone. You know, you're deflated. You don't feel like doing anything. Or you feel like maybe doing the opposite. You know, they sucked it right out of you. And there's other guys that could come in there and tell you exactly the same set of things that need to be fixed, but leave you in the group saying, wow, you know, let's get to it, let's get after it. I'm going to roll my sleeves up, let's fix this. And I would say, I thought about that a lot, and I think about that, you know, as I would talk to different groups or you know, encounter, you know, every day is a new, you know, experiment, things going wrong. And then how do you react to it as a leader? Are you inspiring people to tackle these challenges, inspiring people to work together, inspiring trust and confidence? Or are you sucking the energy out of it? Now, that's what I think being a toxic leader really is. The guy that just leaves you deflated, doesn't inspire you, doesn't leave you wanting to improve and get better. And so, you know, I've got a few things up there. Let's look at the lower left-hand corner. So, just to prove that we didn't invent this, you know, since 2008 or something. Read that first sentence. So that this is Schofield's definition of discipline. And General Schofield was a Civil War general. He weighed about 900 pounds, and they had to crane him up to put him on a horse. And you know, he lived forever, and he was around a long time. And but he wrote this really wonderful commentary on leadership, and they forced us to memorize it at West Point. So I immediately, you know, out of having the energy sucked out of me, decided that I was going to never pay attention to it. You know, I'm going to memorize it, I'll spout it off, but I'm not going to embrace it. You know, just I'll show them. And as I got older and I kind of reflected back on it, it was that first sentence: the discipline which makes the soldiers of a free country reliable in battle is not to be gained by harsh or tyrannical treatment. Okay, so that's a little lofty language at the time. That was 1870s when he wrote that, but that's what he's talking about. He's talking about we've been entrusted with free men and free women that are in our ranks and in our communities and in our organizations that we run every day. And they are there, you know, for the most part voluntarily. Every now and then we draft them, but they are still free men and women, and they will not respond to harsh or tyrannical. And so, you know, what harsh or tyrannical, those are the words of the day, but we know what they translate into today. And so he nailed it. He was in the Army starting in about the 1830s and saw it develop over time. So this idea of we have special people that live in our community, free citizens, that all deserve the same rights and all have the same responsibilities, and those people man our force. And so there's a certain quality of leadership that public servants, whether they're soldiers or policemen or firemen or government officials or civil servants, owe them and should be accountable to them. And those citizens need to be accountable right back with the duties and responsibilities that come from being a citizen of a free country. So that kind of, to me, I thought, there must have been a better way to teach that at West Point than forcing us to memorize that. Stand at attention, sweat a quarter to a wall, you know, and say, holy smokes, You know, I'm not gonna ever listen to that, but that's what they think. Now, up in the upper left, everybody's got their list of things, right? So I tried to make my list short, 4 things. The Army values are 7, and I think that's too much. And I didn't print them out for you, but they are a list of things that, you know, young men and women may or may not hear at the dinner table. And now I'm looking for my list. Yeah, loyalty. A paragraph explaining what loyalty is. Duty. Paragraph on that. Respect. Selfless service. Honor. Integrity. Personal courage. I mean, those are good values. You want those values. You want your military to have those values. But I will tell you that we recruit from the broadest, most diverse, country we've ever been. And there are plenty of folks coming into service that don't have these conversations at school, or in their neighborhoods, or around the dinner table at home. So those aren't necessarily words that they've heard before. Now, they've heard interpretations of those before, and experienced those. But I felt like, and I have felt, that we sometimes talk about our values in ways that are not understandable to the broader audience. So that's one thing that I would say a leader must always do. Make sure they understand who their audience is, who their workforce is, what are they made up of, where do they come from. And increasingly around our country, your armed forces comes from everywhere, from every walk of life. I think just like local government and local civil servants, I mean, this is a great meritocracy, right? And everybody can jump in and hopefully work their way up. And so you got to find a way to somehow communicate those values in ways that your audience understands. When I was talking to the Afghans, if I gave them the 7 Army values to the Afghans, they would go, thank you, General Jacoby. And they go, what is he talking about? He's shoving more stuff down our throats. And so the Army even turned around and took the 7 Army values, and we made them the 4 points of the warrior ethos, which are always put the missions first. We figured everybody could understand it. The mission comes first. You come second. Never quit. Okay, never quit. Never accept defeat. We were helped out with the movies and that. And never leave a fallen comrade. Okay, those are easier to get. Everybody gets those. But they're just a reflection of those values that were written by the founding fathers or somebody a long time ago as being important. So how do you communicate to your audience your values? The things that always mattered to me after 41 years in the Army, and I just wanted people to know that when I walked around a unit or an office or a battlefield, that my antenna was up for, and I could always tell. It was my job to be able to tell right away if I had a good unit, bad unit, needed some help, a unit that was struggling, a unit that I didn't need to come back to because they had it. And those 4 things for me were teamwork, discipline, accountability, and respect. And I was very comfortable talking about those 4 things to any group. And I could adjust them to the age of the group and the composition of the group and the mission of the group. Because Americans kind of get teamwork across the board. Young folks get teamwork. They get the power of team. They understand letting down their teammates. They understand not being a good team member. And I got to tell you, in combat's a team sport. It really is. Best team wins. And they get that. And if they didn't get it the first week of combat, they get it shortly thereafter. So did I press a button somewhere? Okay. You guys have got them on that page. And the next thing is discipline. They really understand discipline too. what I tried to break that down, though, is that discipline's a little trickier. We kind of associate some negativity with discipline, like that's a bad thing, or might be a harsh thing. I tried to flip that around a little bit. I mean, there is old, simple discipline where you're going to do something because I told you to do it, and I'm the general and you're a private. Do about it. Yes, sir, I got that. Now that is not a positive. That's usually an energy-sucking way to go about it. The other kind of discipline is the discipline that you know your workforce, whether it's soldiers or policemen or civil servants, they're going to follow your intent, whether you're there checking on them or not, whether you're looking at what's on their server or not. You know what? And that's the kind of discipline you needed in a counterinsurgency battlefield. So when I was a Corps commander in Iraq, I was responsible for 135,000 men and women spread across the country in Iraq. And they were, a lot of them in small groups, you know, checkpoints here, checkpoints there, squad, platoons, you know, working in villages and all over the place. There's no way you can micromanage that. You just have to go crazy. All the rest of my hair would fall out if I didn't trust them to understand in the absence of General Jacoby and a 1,000-mile screwdriver, what's the discipline that makes them do what's right? We had a lot of problems at checkpoints at the beginning of the war, following the rules of engagement. When you first come in a theater, everything's a threat. And, you know, cars come at you, it's not slowing down. You light up the car. And, you know, you got to go through training and you got to build confidence and competence. And then you still have to be able to fearlessly decentralize out there on the battlefield. Reminds me a little bit when I see a squad car go by and there's one person in it. You know, that's fearless decentralization. I was up in Wyoming talking to Wyoming State Police, and they have 200 state troopers for the entire state of Wyoming, and their radios won't reach. So they're out there driving around by themselves, you know, basically across the state of Wyoming. And I guess on duty at any one time, I don't know, by 200 by how many shifts, and that's not a lot. So that's, you know, fearlessly decentralizing in wide open spaces. But to me, that's true discipline. That's you know, they're not waiting for me to leave and then they're going to go off and do something else. They feel the obligation to follow the commander's intent, and because they trust me and I trust them to execute. And with that trust means that I'll underwrite a mistake they make. If it's well-intended, doing the best they could kind of thing. Because this trust business, we'll keep coming back to it. It's a little bit risky, actually. You have to take risks. You have to accept that. Give a person a chance to prove their trustworthy, and that goes back and forth. Accountability. This is a huge one for us in the military, both positive and negative. So there's the negative accountability, which is if you lose your weapon, you're screwed. You need to account for every single thing you've been issued. Blah 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 blah. So that's kind of to me, the positive part of accountability in my service was if you could get every member of your team. So we're back in Iraq, 135,000. If every single member of that team felt personally accountable to get their piece of the mission done, that's powerful. That's powerful. Everybody on the oar pulling on it together, feeling accountable, feeling that they matter, that they make a difference. Their oar stroke is just as important as 5 up, 3 back, general, private. Everybody's doing their job. Now, that's nirvana, that's aspirational, but that's what you work for. How do you get that? How do you feel? How does everybody in every cubicle at Northcom, 1,800 folks, how do each one of them go home every day and say, I made a difference today? You know, maybe all I did was, I got that thing done, I got that report done, but I got it done right, and I made a difference today. How do you get them to feel that way? Now, that's accountability. And then that requires a leader to feel accountable back. That I owe you that positive energy, that feedback, that telling you matter. The deeper and broader you can reach into your organization and get that bond of accountability between the leader and the led, and you focus it on the mission that you're all trying to achieve together, the more powerful your team's going to go. Everything I'm telling you up here usually circles back to the team. The other thing is, my favorite thing about the military, the thing that was hardest to let go of, and that you actually never let go of, is the feeling of being accountable for each other. Okay, so the Army's got real suicide rate problems. It's worse in special forces, which is odd. And we've been trying to solve this thing forever. And it's too easy to say it's a wartime phenomenon. There's something else going on. Sometimes I worry about, there's kind of a self-harm thing going on the internet, and the music they listen to, and the websites they visit. Why would a couple of young girls from Denver want to go be in ISIS? Do that kind of. So there's some kind of weirdness going on out there that it's getting past me. But in the military, if you focus on this idea of being accountable for each other, which we do, and I think we could do away with about 27 of the special programs and hotline numbers. And, if you looked at your force and you said, in battle, who's accountable for you? It's your buddy left and right, front and back. You're all accountable for each other. You will never leave a fallen combat. But then when they go home, every man and woman for himself. If you were truly accountable for each other, you would know the next guy that's going to be swinging from a rope in his garage. You would know that. And if you did know that, we would have an important question. Why? What did we miss in this responsibility to be accountable for each other? And so that's that may be one of those things where it's a particular or peculiar military spin to it. But why would it have to be? Why wouldn't all of us serving together, public servants, want to be accountable for each other in a way, in important ways? And that creates powerful relationships and trusted relationships, and goes back to teamwork and strong teams. And then respect. So again, we have a sexual assault. It's unbelievable to me that we have the sexual assault problem that we have. And because it rips the guts out of an organization to have that happen. And how can you have a team where any member of that team somehow doesn't get the respect that they deserve? It's the anti-team. It has the anti-teaming effect. And so, I've got a couple of things there that you respect. You respect your enemy's capability and commitment. I think one of the greatest mistakes we ever made was when we started talking about, extremists as if they were subhumans. Guess who became the subhuman at Abu Ghraib prison? We became the subhuman. That wasn't about them, it was about us. How you treat people is, I guess this is the golden rule, I don't know. But on the battlefield, it translates in, do not let your soldiers treat people poorly because they will become lesser soldiers for it. And we did on many occasions. And I think a lot of it went back to, we kind of defined our enemies without respecting their commitment. If you don't think they're committed, holy smokes, you got a blind spot. Our traditions, our military values, they really do matter. They really do need to come from somewhere. There has to be a source of authority for who you are and what you do. I think what you do as members of local government and services, your source authority is who we are as a people. And I'll explain that in some detail in a moment. And then respect our diversity yourself, respect yourself. When you have tens of thousands of 19-year-olds working for you, that's more important than other groups. Probably not. And there's no team without it. So I could go any place in any unit and have a conversation with that unit about those things. And one of my jobs, and being really, really old, and an old soldier, you could kind of get a sense right away about just walking around and looking at the bulletin board, watching training, looking at the vehicles. Does this unit have these things? Because all of them are essential to win on the battlefield. So what's essential to win on your battlefield? That's a good question for leaders to ask themselves. What are the things, what are the characteristics of your profession that make for success? And then how do you empower everyone to buy in and make them part of how they think about their role? Keep faith with your professional ethics and your values. So you got to talk about it. But for me, just reading off the 7, that doesn't get it. I've got to explain what those 7 mean to me. And especially integrity. Integrity is a tough one. Because you can come across almost like the Sunday preacher talking about integrity. And you may miss the mark with who you're talking to. And really, integrity is, there's other words to describe it. Reliability. What's your reliability? You notice that's what Schofield used in his definition. What makes a soldier reliable? I can depend on you. I can depend on you. I trust you. Those are different ways to talk about integrity. And then they say stuff like, well, if you lose your integrity, you lose it forever. But Stephen Covey, in his book on Speed of Trust, says, no, it's hard, but you can recover. You can recover. And it's interesting. It's important how you talk about it with your folks. And so it's not just me putting a big finger in somebody's chest and say, keep faith with your values. It's finding ways to talk about it and make it routinely part of the conversation about who you are and what you're about. Because it does matter. It does matter. It matters out on every checkpoint, and every platoon OP, every border crossing point, and how you do things matter sometimes more than what you do. Don't be afraid of what you don't know. Now, that's important for me because I don't know a lot. So I fearlessly am not afraid of what I don't know. There's no other way a infantryman could command NORAD. And so when I talk about that, what I tell folks, because that doesn't sound right to them, they think that your competence should include complete knowledge of everything. The way I talk about it is it's the question of trusting your subordinates and your experts. Okay? So I will tell you that I had 1,000 pilots all around me, everywhere, in NORAD. And the longer time went by, the fewer pilots they would have. They say, okay, well, we can trust them not to touch that button, we can trust them not to touch that button. And But it comes down to how do you interact with your experts, your subordinates, your fellow, your comrades out there. Do you give them a chance, or do you have to be the smartest guy in the room all the time? And I find it much more powerful to let people tell me how things work, and let them be experts at what they do, and not for me to be the expert at what they're supposed to do. And even though I spent years as a platoon leader and 8 years as a company commander, it's still better, in my view, to not have to be the smartest guy in the room every time, every day. And part of that is listening. We'll talk about listening a little bit. For military leadership, this personal presence thing is a big deal. I'm guessing for a lot of you there's a personal presence thing. Where do you personally pick to be? It matters. It matters when you're a lieutenant. It matters when you're the captain. Sometimes where you pick where not to be. Most of the time in the infantry, you're trying to pick the worst, nastiest, ugliest, most dangerous spot to be. And as a general, that ended up being the Pentagon most of the time. Most dangerous. And then it wasn't always the Pentagon, then it was Capitol Hill a lot of times. So, but you have to think about that, especially as you move up through the bureaucracy. Where's the right place for me to be? Is it looking over somebody's shoulder? Or is there a crisis going on and I need to demonstrate sharing hardship and sharing challenges and, arm around the shoulder, or it's worth thinking about. And very much so in the military, it's worth thinking about. And I suspect that there are sometimes your personal presence is required, and other times it's good to know when to leave it alone for a while, let it bake, and then show up when it's the right time. What you say matters, what you do sets standards. For an officer, every time you walk by a mistake and you don't figure out how to deal with it, you just set a standard. Because they all know, everybody always knows when they're not doing something right. And so when you walk by it, don't say anything. Don't deal with it effectively somehow. Maybe it's circle back and pass it through to another commander. Maybe it is one you walk by. But you ought to think about it. At least in the military. I don't know if that translates for you guys, but the higher up you go, the more everybody's looking at what you say, what you don't say, where you are and where you're not. And so just be aware of it. Be aware that and the higher up you go, the fewer throwaway lines. As a general officer, you don't have any throwaway lines. Everybody's listening to everything, and everything you say will get repeated and will be adjusted. And so I can't tell you the number of times I got told during the day that, sir, I heard that you said X, Y, Z. Oh my God. No, of course not. Of course I didn't say that. So, so you can't be afraid of that. Every now and then you got to fix something. Now, this thing about what you put on YouTube and Facebook and not being anonymous, you all know that. I know you do. But we didn't know that in the military. We thought it was the smartest thing ever. We put an order out that every general officer get on Facebook. Wow, is that stupid? I have like 12 of them right now. And, there's 13 YouTubes and, Skype Jacobys and LinkedIn Jacobys, and most of them are from, other parts of the world. And, so you're not anonymous. They don't tell the truth, but your subordinates will draw conclusions from, and your coworkers and your teammates will draw conclusions from what you post. And so I have a son who's a second lieutenant at Fort Bragg. He said, you better take a look at your Facebook page. Your platoon is going to draw some conclusions about that. He goes, okay, you're right. So, wait a minute, go back. I'm still working my way through the other. I'm killing them with this one first. I had a captain who was a doc. He was, coming out of Fort Lewis and Madigan Army, the giant Madigan Army Hospital. There was a doctor there. He had a blog. He was blogging about the whining, complaining civilian, or whining, complaining dependents, military spouses and kids that would come from care. And his blog went on and on and on. So finally somebody called him on it. And he was shocked when he ended up in front of the 3-Star's desk, for, talking bad about, for breaking his Hippocratic oath, for crying out loud. I really think he thought he was anonymous. He was just Dr. Blog. And so that's a really interesting problem. But it's still a phenomenon. Not everybody gets it, that what's on there's forever and you're not anonymous. And I tell you what I find out is during testimony time, because that's all, the Senate, you think the Senate staff does great research on Jacoby and, they know me backward and forward. No, they just Google and they go down until they find something negative and then you get drilled on. Okay, explain this thing. That was 15 years ago. So that matters to our young leaders. In our young, I'm sure you have, there's a lot of young, everyone in here is younger than I am. But I'm sure you have, that's a mentoring topic right now, I think, for people coming up. Make sure they're careful and they're confident. I think that what we don't want to do is we don't want to lose the power of social media and the power of the internet. But we really got to be careful about, as leaders, how we use it. Self-esteem players, sharing hardships, giving credit, that works every time. Every time. That's that old saying, and you all heard it, if you don't care who gets the credit, you can get anything done. That is powerful. And what's interesting is most of the time everybody knows who's really responsible, especially the people that work for you know who's responsible. And you get big trust points. That's a trust transaction right there. When you give credit. And holding yourself accountable for blame. You don't want to overdo that. You don't need to take out an assurance chain and whack yourself publicly, but you stand up. Your folks know it when you're not standing up. They'll hold you accountable in their court. Reagan said, "Trust but verify," and then I said, "Know when and what to check," because you don't want to overcheck. You got to be careful about that. Trust and verify. When he said that, he was talking about the Soviets. Okay, he wasn't talking about Alpha Team or Second Squad. But you do need to check on stuff. What you pick to check on communicates what's of value to you, and that's the way you should think about it. Not think about I don't trust somebody to get this done right. Use what you check on as a way to communicate what's important to you, because that really does work. Okay, so that's enough on that. One more thing on mentoring. I don't know if you guys do mentoring better in the civilian world than we do. We talk about it. We talk a great fight on mentoring. We're a make it on your own canteen organization. I mean, people are lucky if they've got a mentor that kind of reaches down and helps them along the way. But we move so often, and we're surprisingly competitive, and we don't do the job mentoring that we should do. We're trying to figure it out. We put a lot of programs in place, created volumes of paperwork to fill out on, and we just can't. It's got to be in here, right? Mentoring has to be visceral. It has to be personal. You have to care to mentor. I mean, it needs to matter to you how the young firefighters coming up or the young troopers coming up. And sometimes I worry about that. Okay, and then the other slide was some thoughts about being a general. It was pretty cool to be a general. surprised the hell out of me. I mean, I was general for 14 years, and every day there'd be some point where I look in the mirror and I go, you know, how did that happen? I'm going to get busted here eventually, somebody's going to find out that I'm wearing general officer stuff. To me, it wasn't enough to be a general. Once you made general, there's a little bit of an anvil that you're carrying around on your back if you're a good general. Because people really expect you to be able to fix things right away, you know, with a snap of the finger. And it's hard. You know, I told people at Northcom, the higher up I went, the least or the less decisive I could become. You know, everything was a war of attrition because we were fighting with Congress and fighting with the other services and just unending battles, complicated agendas, and but the folks you're working for, or that are working for you, and you're working for them, they expect you to be able to fix things. And so when I saw or heard a problem, I felt compelled to own it. I wanted to own it. I wanted to own it for the folks that he's a general. Why does he let that happen? Now, you know, that could be the long line at MWR, or, you know, I can't help you with that one. Morale, welfare, recreation, things like that. But maybe that's something for other senior leaders to think about, whether you're in the military or not. So, one of the problems is that if you pick to own it, and grabbed it and said, okay, I got this one, and just wore it out, and you would want to pick the ones that you were sending a message to your subordinates. That matters. When I got to Fort Lewis, we had very, very little money. We had a lot of money. I never complained about what the taxpayers gave us to use. A little distressed right now with the budget stuff, but American taxpayers write big, hefty checks. But commander's discretion was, those checks didn't come to the commanders. They went to Lockheed and Boeing, the people that were making our stuff. And so at Fort Lewis, I looked for low-hanging fruit. What were that? I had a little pot of money at commander's discretion. And what I did with that, I tried to pick some things to demonstrate what was important to me as a commander. Get some quick wins. That really became a technique I used. It's usually when you take over or when you're transitioning to another mission or you're changing out leadership or you're changing the organization, thinking about, okay, what are some quick wins that would be powerful signals to the organization about who I am, what I'm about, what we're about. And so I fixed gyms at Fort Lewis. I took all my money and fixed all the gyms. They were ratty, they were horrible. Yet we were telling all our men and women to do world-class athletic stuff, wear 60 pounds of body armor, and do all this kind of stuff. And we had, Jack LaLanne. You're laughing. You knew Jack LaLanne. So, maybe I have some peers in the audience after all. Okay, so those are kind of the pitches that I would give on leadership. I don't know, and I'm curious as to how much of that transfers, and I suspect some of it does and some of it doesn't. I will just kind of wrap up this portion of it and tell you that I was a soldier for 41 years. Most days, though, I didn't like the Army. I was mad at the Army. I loved being a soldier. And it was the days of the Army wouldn't let me be a soldier that I didn't care much for the Army. It was a big, ugly bureaucracy. It really didn't care about people the way it said it should have. And so, but I hung with it because I loved being a soldier. And I said, I'm going to make a difference if I ever got a chance to make a difference. And some days you do and some days you don't. But every day you try. And so I can tell you, as taxpayers, I was excited to come to work every day. Every day I came to work with hope that we were going to win a battle, whether it was a battle with Congress or a battle with ISIS or whoever we were battling. And I go home tired, usually, and sometimes frustrated, but the important thing was satisfied that I'd done the best I could. That I had never quit. Most of the jobs I had in the Army, there were a lot of jobs I had in the Army I didn't want to have. I can name a handful. My brigade command was the only unaccompanied tour on the brigade command list. There's a huge list. I got selected. I was very fortunate. And I went to Honduras for 16 months on my own. And just did, in the battle days of Central America. And I thought, how could this have happened to me? It turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened. I learned more about working in the interagency. I learned about working with law enforcement. I learned about working with the State Department, the Treasury, and in Honduras, I learned how to partner with folks that were corrupt and that it was inconvenient to partner with them, but I had to partner with them. I had to learn how to do it. I had to learn how to trust them. And then I had to learn how to marginalize those that proved that they couldn't be trusted. And so I learned a lot in that one. After Afghanistan, they said, hey, Jacoby did a great job in Afghanistan. We got a really good job for you. I said, okay, what's that? They said, you're going to go to Alaska. My wife said, wrote me an email in Afghanistan. She said, I really hope you enjoy your tour in Alaska. She's from Puerto Rico, so she said, there are no Puerto Ricans in Alaska. So there could be one. That was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience. My boys loved it. And I was on my own. Nobody cared what I thought. I mean, we were truly decentralized. I learned how to be a general in Alaska. That's because you have 2 senators, a congressman, and a bunch of other people just breathing down your neck because there's no one else for them to breathe down your neck. So you learn a lot. I was a little surprised I got picked for NORAD, to tell you the truth. And I was kind of wondering how that would be. And it brought me here to Colorado Springs. It's the best thing ever happened to me. And I did not lose Santa Claus. Despite all the bets, all the fools that said, stupid infantrymen will lose Santa will be the first year we lose him. And I learned a ton about how our country really works as the NORTHCOM and NORAD commander. And this building trust and the speed of trust and all of that, I watched it in action here in Colorado Springs. Now, when I took over in August 2011, we immediately had a hurricane. What the heck was that first hurricane we had? I can't even remember all the names. And then we had Sandy, and here we had Waldo, and we had Black Forest, and I was saying, why is this happening to me? All the NORTHCOM commanders before me, they just had to talk about it. They didn't have to actually do it. But I saw a community strong, well-led, and we got punched in the nose with the Waldo cannon fire, but I thought people did a great job and learned and built trusted relationships between firemen and policemen and the community and the military. And you know what? We were 1,000,000 times better on Black Forest because of that. Because in the end of Waldo Canyon, we spent more time, at my level, we spent more time trying to fix things than we spent throwing rocks at each other. I never had anyone get on my case about, hey, your C-130 should have been faster or something like that. And we went to school, and we were better the next time. And we were even better when the flood came. We built some really good relationships through those crises. And that's another thing that a leader does is, in every crisis, in every crisis. Take it to the bank, write it down. Whatever the crisis is, it's my computer won't start, or we didn't get the money we thought we were going to get, or they fired half the IT staff, or whatever the crisis is. It's the leader's responsibility to identify the opportunity for the organization. You got to find the opportunity, and then help lead your organization through that crisis by defining the opportunity that comes out the other end. And I'm not saying that this is not, this is my experience in combat, in the worst of times. You have to show the way ahead. And I know that's happening in the town of Ferguson, and it's happening in other places. True leaders are going to have to step up and show how there's an opportunity to improve things. How are we going to make a difference now? How are we going to take this horrible situation and turn it for the better? I think that's what agile leaders do. We've always tried to define agile leadership in the military. I think that's what an agile leader does. He doesn't curl up in a little ball and go in the field position and feel sorry for himself or herself. You gotta step forward and make it a positive. Try to figure out where the opportunity is. There always is. There always is. Okay, so I'm at 9. I'm supposed to be done at 9:45. I really didn't think it would take that long. I thought, oh my God, what am I going to say for him? Do any of you guys have any questions? I did have this book. Look, I didn't come here to teach this book, and I don't believe in slavishly following business models, because they don't always work for the government. We went to Raytheon. Everyone was genuflecting to Raytheon about 15 years ago. They've transformed themselves, these geniuses, and we talked to the CEO, and in the end, somebody asked, a group of Army officers, 1-stars, they were 1-stars, asked him, well, what was the single most important thing you had to do to transform your organization, make it a high-performing, successful, competitive organization? He said, well, to tell you the truth, the most important thing I did was I fired 50% of middle management. I just had to get rid of them if I was going to get by. Well, I can't do that. I can't fire 50% of middle management. You fire all the captains and non-commissioned officers. So what am I studying that business model for? So I've kind of had a problem with all the Welsh books and all the Who Hit My Cheese books and all that kind of stuff. But this is real stuff. This speed of trust and thinking about building trusting relationships and thinking about taking risks. I've had to do it in every part of the world. If we're going to get ourselves out of Iraq, we're going to have to really build a trusting relationship with the Iraqis. If we're going to get ourselves out of Afghanistan, we're going to really have to build a trusting relationship with the Afghans. If we're going to get ourselves passing laws again, there's going to have to be some trust developed between both sides of the aisle. It is not soft. It is not, for social scientists to worry about. It is practical, everyday stuff. And it is it's what makes the world go round, and it's what makes things go wrong. So I'm going to tell you one last thing. These places I told you about I've been to, they're horrible. The worst armies I've ever dealt with, and I've dealt with crappy armies out there all over the globe. Most of them are pretty bad. Most of them are abusive and don't deserve to be carrying guns. And it's always because there's no clear chain of accountability. There's no way for them to be held accountable by either their bosses or by the people of name the country that we're at. That's the single defining feature, lack of accountability for their actions. And thus they become corrupt and they become abusive and et cetera, et cetera. It happens every time. We have tried so hard in this counterinsurgency business to build police force and local governments.
That's where it was failing in Iraq. That's where it was failing in Afghanistan. It is infinitely harder to build a police force than it is an army. It's a piece of cake to build an army. It's impossible to build a police force if you don't have a government that's perceived as legitimate by the people, and the people don't have trust and confidence in that police force. The authority of a police force, wherever it was in the world that I dealt with, emanated from the people. And so you could spend a lot of money on it. You could train the heck out of it. But if the people didn't trust it, if they didn't understand how are they held accountable, it didn't work. And that was the first thing to fall apart. When people wonder what fell apart in Mosul, well, a horrible police force and a horrible army fell apart. And we worked as hard as we could to train them. They knew everything that we could teach them, and we did all this stuff. But they really didn't have the authority that came from a legitimate government for a supported population. Okay. The best thing about, so people want to know what's the best thing about coming home after all these deployments. I love this about America. When I come home, things work. Stuff works. Now, in Broadmoor Bluffs it's a little bit differently, but most of the time if you put your garbage can out there, it's going to get picked up, right? Street lights are going to work. Damn near most of the time everybody's going to stop at a red light. You can go and get a license, driver's license, without paying a bribe. I mean, there's a million things like that. And I just love it when I come home and stuff works. And stuff works at this level, not at the Washington, D.C. level. And communities are wonderful places because things work because of people like you. And we take it for granted how much we love and appreciate the fact that things work, that we live in a great country like this. So anyway, I appreciate what you do. You make stuff work. And I hope that you got a little bit out of this. I sure enjoyed talking to you. And I'll answer questions for as long as you have left. Because I know you got better speakers than me that you want to get to. So, anyway, any questions? Sir?
General, you touched on this idea of the mission first and war second. Somehow you have to balance that with also letting the folks that you work with know you care about them, what they need is important, so the mission does come first. Can you just elaborate on your thoughts on that a little bit more? How did you strike that balance? How did you persuade people that they were important, what they did matter, but sometimes you have to subordinate their needs to what we have to do?
Right. That's always, a critical initial question that you talk to people about when they come in. And you try to explain to them the mission comes first, and that we're willing to risk your life to accomplish it. So how do you get buy-in to that? And first of all, you don't talk about I and you. You talk about us, we, us, and it's often achieved. And then you talk about the bigger meaning of what you're trying to accomplish, and then you try to explain and convince the importance of every single person in the accomplishment of that task, and it's a worthy task. And ultimately, the ultimate risk when you strap on a gun or you rush into a building is there. And so it starts with leaders communicating the importance of what you're doing to the point of what some people think is a little corny. Isn't it interesting the criticism of the American sniper that comes out? That somehow what he was doing wasn't worthy of respect.
Snipers are cowards.
Yeah, so not everybody buys into that, okay? But you have to get them to buy into it. And you can't order them to buy into it. It's how you live and how you, and then, to especially for 19-year-olds, fairness really matters. They're willing to do everything, anything, if they think it's fair. And so when you ask them to walk point, I'll walk point, because I know that, Jones would walk point, and Smith would walk point, and everyone would get their turn, and everyone would, it would be fair. And I trust my leader. And I trust my leader that they wouldn't ask me to take this risk if it wasn't important. And they trust me. And eventually you flip this thing around and they said, they trust me to walk point. And then they embrace that risk with you. That's that business about how you get everybody in the team to feel the importance, their personal accountability for accomplishing the mission. And so I believe it's a false distinction between mission and that. But you have to talk to the youngsters about getting the mission done. Because a lot of folks come to us and they haven't really finished a task yet in their life. So a lot of it's about finishing something. Finishing successfully. That's what we're building. We're building. We're getting brand new recruits. We're building folks that may not fully understand some of these ideas. That's why you have to say, part of the warrior ethos is, I will put my mission first. They're like, why? Are you kidding me? Ahead of what I'm going to eat next? Ahead of my iPhone? I'm going to put my mission first. So it's communication. It's a good question. Yeah.
This might actually come on the back end of that as well, but when you went into the hostile environments, Afghanistan, Iraq, and you're trying to build a relationship and rebuild this country and form community ties, how did you see that achieved, where you get our service members to not see this as an us versus them, and yet maintain their safety, but also build those community relationships?
Yeah. That's tough. We had a spite of blue on green, too, which meant that, or green on blue, which meant that we have, every now and then, an Afghan and an Iraqi would cut loose on an American or Allied formation, kill someone. Boy, that's a trust ender right there. But yet you have to get out there and partner. And so my approach was that you had to take risk. You had to take risk to build trust and to build a partner. This is about words and actions. And pick things that you could deliver that would prove that you were trustworthy. And give them a chance to be trustworthy back. And then when they fail, then marginalize them. Marginalizing them comes in all different forms. And so Senator McCain once asked me, he said, how can you trust the Mexicans so much? They're so corrupt. And I said, well, Senator, that's not going to detach itself and float away from the United States. We're connected, and our economies are integrated. And I said, and I have partnered with more corrupt people for less important reasons with more risk than the Mexicans. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, Afghans, Iraqis. We really tried hard with them. And we found lots of worthy guys. I think the other thing is, policemen and firefighters and government officials, you guys have to know your environment, right? You have to have situational awareness of when it changes and when conditions change. And just one quick story, and I know I have to stop, but this was a good one. That was a good question. So when I got to Iraq, we were going to implement the security agreement, and at the end of my tour, we were going to turn over combat ops to the Iraq. And I was appalled at where we were at. We weren't really partnering at all. In multinational core Iraq, there were no Iraqis. In Iraqi freedom, Iraq wasn't in the Iraqi freedom list of who was in the fight. But when we would communicate with the Iraqi ground forces command, we would take a big, thick stack of U.S. documents and say, here's this year's plan. It's like doing a leaflet drop on it. And they said, no, thank you very much. Right out the end. We were not partnering at all. And so I bought that book, I gave it to every officer in the Corps, and we spent the 6 months prior to going to Iraq talking about how we had to change. If we're going to turn this over to them, we've got to change what we're doing. And so, had a lot of head knocking with General Ali, my counterpart, the Iraqi Ground Forces Commander. And, General, we need to do this, or we need to do this. And we were in the Al-Faw Palace. And he said, General Jacoby, he spoke. He said, I got to tell you something. I know you're impatient with me, but we are people that are very much learned to live. And we can't move as fast as you can. And it's harder for us to accept. It's harder for us to trust. Just because of who we are, where we came from. He said, I was a division commander in the Gulf War. I was one of 11 Iraqi division commanders. He said, after we lost, Saddam Hussein lined all 11 of us up here. And he screamed at us for 12 hours. And we stood here and urinated. Right? And I stood right there because I stared at that spot. And then he came over with a pistol and he shot every other one of us. And once he let live, they put a burlap bag over my head. They took me to Diyala province, and I've been raising dates. I've been a date farmer since you came back and rescued us. So he said, please be patient with me. It's hard for me I'll get there, but it's hard for me right now. And I got it. And I just spent 2 months working with a guy. I had no idea who he was, what he'd been through. What his frame of reference, what's the context? And so, but every day, all of you have to know that. And so, and it took us a while. It took us 10 years in Iraq and Afghanistan to get the lay on it. But after that, we started cutting each other a little bit of slack, and I looked for opportunities to trust each other. We built a pretty good relationship. I hope he's still alive. I haven't been doing so good. But anyway, that was a great question. I know I have to stop now. It was a real privilege to talk to you all. I wish you best of luck. You have a wonderful community. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens because of you guys. So thank you.